G'day, Pedro's my name. I'm a custom rod builder, and I'm going to give a bit of a demo on how I do tiger wrap. So there's a couple of steps that we need to go through to do a tiger wrap, and there's a few little tips and tricks that I'll show you along the way. We'll keep it fairly basic. We'll keep it to a 3-thread tiger wrap. So what I'll do shortly is I'll put the base wrap down on a piece of blank here and show you how to burnish it and tie it off. And once we've got that complete, then we'll bring one that I prepared yesterday and put some epoxy on up into the lathe here, and we'll do the overs there and show you how to burnish that, and have a look at what sort of effect we can get out of the tiger wrap. At any rate, we'll move on to the next step, and we'll lay the base layer down on this one and get this thing started. Okay guys, we've got a blank set up here in the lathe, and what I wanted to show you is my thread carriage here. So to carry out or to do a tiger weave or tiger wrap, you're going to need to have a multi-spool thread carriage. So you can put your threads on there and keep them under some sort of tension. To try and do it by hand, it'd be, let's say, impossible. I'd hate to try and do it and try and keep all the threads in alignment. So anyway, what we might do is we'll get the base wrap put down with the 3 colours that we're using here, which is a white, sort of light mid-grey, and a black thread. These are all nylon D and C threads, so we've used some bigger threads so that we can see it a bit better on the camera. You can use whatever threads you like. You can use A's, you can use Madeira, you can use C's, D's, the whole lot, or a combination of any of those threads. But you'll need to remember that when you do your top layer with your sacrificial threads, you need to use the same threads that you used on the bottom, so that you create an even gap to allow some of the pattern to come through. Alright, so we'll get on and wrap this bottom layer, and we'll show you how to burnish it, and then we can move on to the next step after that. Okay, so let's get started with the base wrap on this. So we're going to wrap 6 inches of this tiger wrap, just to show you how you get it all together. So what I'm going to use is the black is going to be my base thread. So we'll just start that off exactly the same way that you'd start off an underbind or a guide wrap or anything like that. So we'll just wrap over the tag end 3 or 4 times just to secure it in position, and then same as you would normally do, cut the tag end off, and then I'll go maybe another half a dozen turns, something like that. Okay, creates a band about 1/4 of an inch wide. So now that we've got that band there, we'll inlay the 2 other colours that we're going to use in this base wrap, and it's as simple as through the tensioner up underneath your main thread, and then hold it. You can put a piece of tape there and hold it if that's the way you normally do it. I generally just use my fingers, and what we want to try and do is lay these threads, wrap these threads and lay them on the blank side by side. Try and eliminate gaps if you can to get it started. It's a little bit difficult because you've added 2 threads and it wants to sort of go all over the place just to get started, but you can sort of straighten it all up a little bit. Be careful when you're wrapping them side by side like this not to lay threads on top of each other. It's preferable that if it's not going to be perfect, you should have a small gap in there which you can burnish out, but if you've got threads laying on top of each other, it's very difficult. So alright, we've pretty much got it started now. So what we'll do is we'll just you can see there's a tiny little gap in there, but I'm not too worried about that. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll run this. You can see there that I've actually stacked a thread on top. I'll just go back and unstack that thread. I'm trying to go too fast, so anyway, I'll just move along. Just wrap all 3 of them side by side all the way up the blank. Try and be careful, and this will happen if your tensions aren't all very, very similar, that you'll have one thread that might sit loose in there and might want to pop up out of position. But so spend a bit of time and just try and gauge the tension of your threads and try and get them as similar as you can. Again, I've got one stacked up there that I'll get rid of. So I'm just keeping the tension on the thread with my finger until I bring it back down onto the eye of the carriage here. So that's probably pretty good. Okay, so we're getting up near the end. Again, I stack one up. I'll always make sure that I've got no threads stacked on top of each other. A couple of gaps that you can see in there are not really a problem, and you'll see why in a minute. So, okay, so that's close enough to the end for me. That'll do. So what we need to do is obviously tie this off so that we can keep the two coloured threads in position. So all I do is I grab the two coloured threads. Remember that the black thread is still under tension from the tensioner. Snip them off, pull them in underneath the black thread, and then just wrap over the top of them as you would with any other normal wrap. Once you've got a couple over the top, you can sort of let it go a little bit. Put your pull through in position for your black thread, so you can do a tie off, and probably put half a dozen turns over those two coloured threads. Once you've got that, you can snip them off and then bind over them until you've got another 1/4 inch band there. Okay, so we'll just tie that off now. Okay, so again, this is just the same sort of tie off that you're used to doing elsewhere. Okay, so let's burnish some of those gaps out of this thread. Remember, we're using 3 D threads here basically, so it'll burnish out fairly easily. Okay, so pretty much that's the base wrap done there. What we need to do now, we want to create some sort of waves and circles and any type of pattern you like, really. And the way that we can do that is we'll burnish the threads to create a distortion in the threads. So first of all, you'll notice that I wrap this from my left to right. You keep in mind that your bottom layer is always wrapped opposite to your top layer. So if you wrap from left to right for your bottom layer, you've got to wrap from right to left for your top layer. Okay, so what I also like to do is a 0 axis, where probably you've got a reel seat and a tip on the rod to give you the top of your rod. I'll call that the 0 axis. There's none on this rod at the moment. It's just the spare blank that we're using for the demonstration. But so on if I imagine that this is the 0 axis where the reel seat would be, then the direction that I wrap the threads, I want to burnish on the 0 axis the same way. So you put a little bit of pressure on them. You don't want to fray the thread, but you want to use a nice smooth tool. And what we're trying to do here is push the threads to get them to create a bit of a curve like that. So we've done that there now, and to enhance that curve a little bit more, about a 1/4 inch off the 0 axis, I'll burnish the threads back the opposite direction, and do that 2 or 3 times, so we're getting a curve going back the opposite way. And then again on the other side of the 0 axis, I'll do the same thing 2 or 3 times and create some distortion in the thread there. Then I'll go back to the 0 axis and just give that one more push up this way to enhance that distortion that we've got. Okay, so that's on the 0 axis. So I'd also do the same thing on the 180-degree axis. So on the bottom of the rod, I'll burnish on the 180 axis the same way that we wrapped the threads onto the blank, 2 or 3 times to get a bit of distortion in the thread, and then again 1/4 inch on the other side of the axis, back the opposite way, and repeat the process on the other side of the axis. And one more time on the 180-degree axis, just create that distortion. Okay, so I'm pretty happy that that's got a fair bit of distortion in that thread. I'll just roll it around. You should be able to see that on the camera, how the threads are waving one way and the other. Okay, so once we've completed that stage of the wrap, the next thing that we want to do is give this at least one coat of epoxy. I like to put 2 or 3 coats of epoxy on because this will help create a lens between the bottom layer and the top layer, and it actually enhances the distortion of the thread. It gives you better patterns, and you know, just looks a whole lot better anyway. But you can get away with 1 coat of epoxy if that's what you want to do. All right, so we'll move on. The next step will be on the rod that I did yesterday. I created the same base wrap, and I've given it some coats of epoxy. So we'll do the top wrap and show you what we're going to do with that, and then we'll sacrifice the threads and let's see what sort of a pattern we can make. Okay.